All right, well, let's get started. I know that I'm not stealing any thunder. I'll just do a few introductions. Let's take a minute. Let's start on the end. Guys, introduce yourselves.
Awesome. So, first of all, when you told me how many people you thought would be here, I did think you were a liar. I didn't say it out loud, though.
I'm glad you thought so highly of me. Okay.
Like, the round of applause that you guys get got well deserved. I've been part of the cyber defender community for a while, and what you guys are doing here is awesome. And this gives me hope. We can actually start winning if every community was as active as you guys are. It's really impressive. So kudos to you guys, and thanks for having us. So yeah, my name's Chas Clausen. I'm the field CTO for Sumo Logic, focused on cybersecurity. I won't bore you too much with my background. It's quite diverse. I spent a few years at the NSA on their red team doing adversarial emulation, pen testing type work against the hardest targets, I would hope, at least in the world, which is the U.S. government, military. I was there during the Snowden debacle, and so I was on that incident response team. If you want to hear some war stories, I'll tell you a little bit what I can tell you. But yeah, like I said, I've been a defender for a long time, worked for a lot of Fortune 500 companies just doing consultative work, and looking forward to tonight's panel discussion.
Thanks for joining us, sir. Devon?
Hi, I'm Devon.
Hi, Devon.
Does not need an introduction.
No, I work at Truist Bank. I'm a cybersecurity senior manager, senior vice president, manage a team of cybersecurity architects. I'm also a licensed attorney, and I own my own law firm. And I own a cybersecurity consulting firm.
And you get to sit next to me.
That is definitely a bonus. That's it.
Thank you. Amy, please.
Yeah, well, hello. I am Amy Tyler. I am a manager on the security engineering team at Pendo. Been with Pendo for 2.5 years, and I've been in a dedicated security role for 7 years now. I'll say that I started my career as a Unix systems administrator. That's a long time ago. That was when we said Unix, not Linux. But quickly moved into network engineering. I learned route switch, load balancers, firewalls before moving into security. So been in this space for a while now, and I really enjoy it. So.
Excellent. So glad to have you. Chuck, long time.
Hey everybody, Chuck Kessler, currently the CISO at Pendo. So I've got my team up here, and we are a Sumo Logic customer, which is why I guess they asked us to be up here. So
Hey, we're a Pendo customer too.
That's right, you are a Pendo customer, and those two are completely independent of each other. But awesome product. I'm sure we'll have some interesting stories to talk about tonight. But yeah, CISO at Pendo. I've been there for 5 years. Prior to Pendo, I was the CISO for Duke University Health System for I think 7 years. Prior to that, I was at Symantec for about 6 years doing a lot of security consulting work. So a lot of different types of roles. Like Amy, I started my career in the sysadmin and network admin world. So definitely have kind of traversed the general IT into the security world. Ironically, now I actually own the IT team at Pendo as well. So I kind of have the best of both worlds at the moment. But yeah, just it's great to be back here. I have, as Rob said, long history working with ISSA. In the past, been the VP and the education director here. It's just great to see this group, still going strong, and so many people coming back. Like Rob said, post-COVID numbers actually bigger than pre-COVID. So yeah, just it's awesome to see all that. So thank you all for being here.
Hello.
Hello. There you go.
So my name is Colin. I am an associate security engineer underneath Amy. I only have 1 year of experience. I promise you, this is a lot more interesting than
he knows more. He knows more than the rest of us about all this.
Yeah.
Trust us.
I probably spend the most amount of time in Sumo Logic on this panel, but I'm hoping to bring
all that hands-on expertise.
Yeah. All that hands-on expertise. Yeah. So I've been coming here for a long time. I think this is year 6 for me. I've been coming here since I was 15.
15.
Wow.
Yeah, long
Watched
time.
him graduate high school,
Yeah.
college,
Yeah.
and get a
The backstory is Colin's mom worked at Duke when I was there, and she contacted us one day and said, "Hey, my son wants to learn about security." And like, he's 15 years old. Well, like, bring him over. And like Shelly over in the corner over there, he just went and sat with a bunch of our folks for a couple of days and learned everything that we were doing. And we suggested that he come out here to the ISSA meetings, and the rest is history. He now works for me at Pendo. So after getting his degree at ECU, so
Go
it's a great
Pirates.
story.
Baby.
Go Pirates.
You know, there's an unsung hero in all this is Colin's mom.
Exactly.
Think about that. She brought it back and forth to the meetings.
wasn't
Great.
an insecurity issue, you know, it was just dumping out.
What?
Was she security?
No, she was not security. Yeah, she
Like I said something bad.
I thought you said, was she insecure?
No, he said she didn't work in security. See?
That's why I was looking at you. I heard the same thing Sean did. So we've already done an introduction. So we want to kick it over. We're going to talk at a high level about what is Sumo. So take it over, sir.
Awesome. So, appreciate you letting us put our logo, plaster our logo everywhere, right? But we're gonna try and keep this as vendor agnostic as possible, right? I think for me, we're all defenders at heart. Raise your hand if you consider yourself like a cyber defender in some way or another. Awesome. So that's really why I'm in this role, right, at Sumo Logic. We'll talk about some of the differentiators that Sumo Logic brings to the table, but certainly if you guys have questions, and the panelists here, I'm sure will have some, what you guys can walk away with is like really where is the industry moving, what are some best practices that you guys can incorporate. So I guess we'll just start with who is Sumo Logic. A lot of great conversations out there at the booth. Some of you had heard of us, some of you had not. We are a cloud native security analytics platform. So I'll unpack that just a little bit. Cloud native meaning we were born in the cloud, right? So at no point in time were we ever like a software solution that you would rack and stack in your data center. The founders, interestingly enough, were the original founders of ArcSight. So raise your hand if you've heard of ArcSight. Oh, wow, okay. So you got one of the old timers in here.
That's our thing.
Really? Really?
You're young. So they really saw like the pain that came with installing a legacy solution, right? Because SIMs in general always had a bad rap. Everybody hated SIM. It was a necessary evil. Part of the reason is so much of your effort was just care and feeding of the beast, right? Keeping it up. Was it scalable? Did you write a rule that brought the system down? Did you have enough CPU and memory horsepower just to run the dang thing? So with the advent of cloud about 12 years ago or so, they said, what if we could take the same approach and build it natively in the cloud, right? And so they opted for AWS, kind of leading the pack back then, I guess still are, and rebuilt the entire thing in a scalable cloud native way. So the cool thing about that is now it's virtually zero O&M, right? Meaning you don't have to, what we call building the church for Sunday, like edge cases, which, you know, if you're in retail, Black Friday, if you're Epic Games, which is one of our customers, or CBS Interactive, we monitored the Super Bowl. You don't have to architect out some massive thing based on what your peak ingest might be, right? It's the cloud. It scales as it should be. The advantage of that is we can pass on the savings back to the customers because we scale up as needed, but inversely we also scale back down, right? So you're not paying to run all this massive architecture in the cloud. So that's really what we are. We're a cloud security analytics platform. We are backed by what we call our Sumo Logic Threat Labs team, which is actively monitoring what the attack landscape looks like, releasing rules. And again, these rules are pushed out transparently to our customers. I think our cadence is now twice a week. They globally push out rules. And I think we have maybe 800 or 900 rules actively running, and they're all on, right? It's not like the old days where you're like, the first thing that we would do is turn all the rules off. It's too noisy and it's gonna break and let's start over. All the rules are running and you can't really bring us down by writing a bad rule. the cool thing is, and I just heard this actually on the drive here, I'm from Richmond, by the way. Last week we had 10,000 active analysts in our platform for the week, right? So those are unique users using the platform, doing searches, writing rules. So I thought that was kind of cool, just to hear like how many people are getting their hands on the technology. But yeah, if you have more questions, certainly grab me afterwards, and we'll dig into some of the technology that we have in a little bit.
All right. So let's go ahead and start with the questions. The best part about panels is you're going to be part of this too. So if I point at you, got a question coming for you. So the first thing I want to start with Colin. So Colin, you're hands-on every day. So I'm going to take a look at this. Detecting unknown and insider threats is a constant challenge. So what are some of your techniques and some of the basics, kind of the basic things that you do during the day?
Yeah, so we rotate being on call week by week, and so I was on call a few weeks ago, and the biggest thing we do is we take advantage of a lot of anomaly-based detections. There's just some things that day to day, hour by hour that we just don't see. So we take advantage of a lot of anomaly-based detections. We review things very thoroughly. We review all sorts of tools. We really try and do a lot of threat hunting, get really intimate with our logs, just get as deep as we can.
Good. All right, Chuck, from the strategic level, tell me about that. What are you seeing?
Yeah, actually, I want to back up a little bit and talk about how we got to where we're at and the things that Colin does. So when I started at Pendo 5 years ago, we didn't have a SIM. We didn't have a security team. I was the first security person. And we did have people paying attention to security, but they were doing a lot of other things as well. But Pendo was scaling up. It was time to grow a security team. So one of the first things I did, my first hire was a security operations engineer. Somebody I hired actually had interned for us at Duke, and she had gone to MetLife, and I hired her away from MetLife. And we thought, well, we need a SIM, but before we get a SIM, we need to know what we have. What data would we put into a SIM? So we actually spent about 6 months in our logs, looking through all the log data that we had and figure out what was interesting, what were the things that we would want to put into a SIM. Because we need to know what threats we actually need to be looking for. So where are those threats at? What logs are they in? Contrast that to when I was at Duke, and I know I have some Duke friends here in the audience here. So when I was at Duke, we were a Splunk shop, and we sort of took a different approach there. And that was the first big SIM implementation I'd done there. My approach there was, let's just put everything in there and then figure out what we have later. Actually, I don't think that was the right move. Because we ended up with a behemoth, lots of data that was actually very hard to search, very hard to find the things that we were interested in. So, I think getting intimate with our logs and knowing the types of things that were, actual threats that we might need to look for, and using that as our starting point ended up giving us a much more effective SIM platform. And of course, we continue to evolve that. We took what we did, and there's a sort of a daily run book that we use. But we're always evolving that as we learn new things, as we find new threats. We will learn things from everything from pen tests to bug bounty reports to purple team exercises we run internally. So we'll factor all that information in. If we find something new, we'll add that to the run book. But yeah, it's an ever-evolving process.
Awesome. Chuck.
I don't need a mic. Chuck, would you speak to the difference between doing that in an organization the size of Pendo versus one the size of Duke? Like, would you change your approach based on the size of the organization at all?
If I could go back and do it over, no, I don't. I guess our friend Mike is not here in the audience. So Mike and I might have a different.
Shivering somewhere out in the universe right now, though.
I don't know. Mike and I might have a difference of opinion on this, but looking back, I do feel like we probably should have spent a little bit more time thinking about all the data that we had and what would actually be important to get into the SIM, even in an organization as large as Duke. And of course, we were doing an on-prem deployment, which actually I think made it harder. And back then, that seemed to be the right thing to do. As we were talking about earlier, Sumo is a cloud-native platform. Pendo is a cloud-native platform. So it actually fits us very well. Now, Duke is a very on-prem oriented organization. So, there's a lot of differences there. Was, whatever. You're kind of hybrid now. But
priorities, though. You're a data-centric company, as Pendo is, and that is your bread and butter is your data. So
right.
Protecting it is the number one priority. Right?
Right. Well, I mean, at Duke, it is pretty important as well. But I would say one big difference is that, and again, Shelley, you could correct me, but you probably still have a lot of infrastructure that you're managing as well. Even though you have stuff that has been moved into the cloud, you probably still have a lot of infrastructure. We have very little infrastructure. Our infrastructure is in the cloud. It's assets that we are spinning up and down constantly. Everything is terraformed, and what's there today is not going to be there 2 days from now, because it's all going to get blown up, and the whole cattle and pet thing. We don't keep a lot of pets. We have a lot of cattle. So it means we spend a lot more time looking at data from our platform versus infrastructure data, which I care a lot less about, because the infrastructure is very ephemeral.
That's good. I know, Peter, you got a question. I'm going to talk over to Amy real quick and just give me your insights. What are your thoughts when it comes to best practices, your day-to-day? What does that look like for you as far as threat hunting, response?
Yeah, so being on the same team, I think it's from a strategic perspective, I can just kind of carry the discussion around how we continue to continuous improvement and how we continue to evolve what we're looking at, especially as threats change, as the tactics, techniques, procedures, the TTPs, as those change over time. You touched on it, Chuck. One of the things that we do is we do blue team exercises. Those are usually combined with purple team exercises, but we'll break out as a blue team and do some blue teaming where we're looking at a specific scenario, and we're able to map out that scenario and look at paths about how an attacker might achieve that objective in our environment. And when we're mapping it out that way, we can see where we might have gaps. So where are gaps in our logging? Because we've been strategic about what logs we're sending in, we want to make sure that we're still getting the right logs that'll help us identify that scenario. And we want to make sure that we are able to identify it with events and with alerting. And so that's one of the things that we do to sort of continuously improve and help us stay up to date so that we can catch these emerging threats as they happen.
It's a great question that Shelley asked there, and I think what Chuck and Amy said, there's something, you guys want to be as agile as possible, right? So as you guys are looking to shift to the cloud, take advantage of the shared responsibility model, right, that the cloud offers, because chances are there's a lot of overhead that you guys are doing today that could be moved, whether that's AWS and they're providing, guard duty or security hub or different technologies. With Sumo Logic, right, our threat labs team, CrowdStrike provides great, crowdsourced threat intelligence and, EDR technology. Don't feel like you have to boil the ocean yourself. And that's really why everybody's adopted cloud so rapidly, because you're able to elevate, sometimes we call it democratizing security, right? You cannot operate in a silo and win. It does not work, it does not scale. And so as you move off on-prem technologies, make sure that whatever new tools you're bringing into your security stack has that true SaaS value proposition.
That's good. Before we move to Don, Peter, did you have a comment, sir?
Just a quick question. Before you were talking about how ephemeral and constantly changing, you spin down your infrastructure. How do you go about establishing a performance baseline of, okay, this amount of data goes from this point to this point on this day at this time? How do you do that? Because if you're going to look for anomalies, you have to have a baseline to come from. So how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I wouldn't say we necessarily have a perfect answer for that at the moment either. I mean, but one of the premises that we're using is looking at effectively endpoints. So we're instrumenting those cloud assets. We're Sentinel-1 on our cloud assets. So that's where we're gathering that information about those those assets that are coming up and down. So the assets that's there today is not going to be there 2 days from now, but we're going to know what that behavior looks like between those two. So I don't know, Amy, if you have anything interesting you might want to add to that, but that's philosophically how we're approaching that.
Yeah, I think two different ways we can look at it. We have an engineering operations team that is more focused on infrastructure, and they're looking at those metrics.
Great point.
That are telling us, giving that layer of performance. On the security team, we're attempting to take advantage of outliers within our SIEM. So using that built-in functionality to say, okay, at this point, this is sort of anomalous to what we see at this time of day, over a typical week. So we're learning to use the outlier technology that is available to us there. I'll share that with Sumo, one of the things that we do is we had an event that happened at one point where we began ingesting a lot of data unexpectedly. And it was really easy for us to use some built-in dashboards to say, hey, where is that data coming from and what caused it? We had turned on some extra logging or something we had done within our platform. But those are probably some ways that we're looking to scale and make sure that we're maintaining some, balance there.
Yeah, and you actually made a great point about our partnership with our engineering operations team, because they have our entire infrastructure instrumented in terms of looking at what's happening from a performance and a network traffic perspective. So yeah, occasionally they will pop things over to us and say, hey, this looks weird in terms of network traffic, and we can dig into it from there. But yeah, definitely that helps.
That's good, Hank. Yeah. So I also wanted to, Mariana's hand up. Somebody said CrowdStrike, and look who walked in the door.
Yeah, we are CrowdStrike customers as well,
Yeah,
so
just
on our endpoints.
But I want to shift before we go over there. I want to talk to Devon for a minute, because he's, one thing we're very proud of is, Devon is an attorney now. And being in technology and being an attorney, the vantage point that I want to bring to a lot of our panels is bringing legal perspective. So Devon, because you have that IT background, how important is this when somebody has threats, when they have, potential breaches? How important is this to have these discussions?
Well, first I'll say that I'm not speaking for Truist right now. I'm speaking for Devon.
Off the record.
Off the record.
That's a true lawyer talk.
There you go. There you go. I'm learning. Unfortunately, not a Sumo Logic customer, but I will say what Sumo Logic does is incredibly important from a legal standpoint, right? Because you're thinking of all the logs you're collecting, all the data. When you have a threat or you have an incident, those logs are king. They tell you the story of what happened, how it happened, and when it happened. And so having that information is very important. The thing from a legal standpoint that you want to be very cautious of or thinking about as an attorney is what is going to be discoverable if you have to go to court and things like that. That's a huge concern, because a lot of companies may not want all those logs or those reports or that information discoverable, because it may reveal that they were deficient or negligent in something, and now you have liability. So a lot of legal considerations with that. There's a lot of theories on how do you maintain privilege when you're responding to an incident and things like that. So that's
good. No, we want to have these legal conversations. If there's 2 phone calls, I bet you'll answer. One is your tax preparer, and one's your attorney, right? All right, so while we're having these, we want to take a look at the financial impacts. Now, Charlie, you got a question?
I have so many questions. Just keep pointing at me. I have 2 questions for the panel. One is, again, based on a smaller size company or a larger size company, how many FTEs do you have dedicated to log analytics? To just, Colin, you're doing a rotation. How many people are going through this? Because that's a significant consideration in staff resourcing to dedicate to that as opposed to the rest of your security team. And then I'll ask my second question.
Yeah, so I will actually just give you sort of the profile of the entire organization. So Pendo is about not quite 800 people total. We're a global company, so headquarters is here in Raleigh, but offices in the UK, Israel, non-engineering offices in Australia and in Japan as well. But across that, we have roughly, I think, around 200 engineers. And we were actually part of the engineering organization. And within that, we have 12 security people. I count myself in that 12. And within that, Amy's team actually has security operations and compliance. So within that, she has three engineers dedicated to the security operations side and an additional 3 on the compliance side. And Amy is very hands-on as well, so she does all of that in addition.
And
so
rotation.
yeah, so you count her as well. So it's really 4 people on the security operations side doing that rotation.
Okay, doing some quick math to try to figure out how that scales to an organization of 40 or 50,000 people, but I think I can do that in my head pretty quickly.
Well, I don't know if I would do it on the basis of people, but anyway, yeah.
I know. Okay, and you bring up another question that I have, which is how are you deciding how many days worth of logs and what types of logs you're routinely collecting? This has been a huge point of discussion for us. Like I don't think a lot of the regs, other than the PCI regs, actually call it out. They all say collect logs, but not a lot of them tell you how many logs you have to collect. And I just heard Devon say you don't want to collect too much because you don't necessarily want to put yourself in a difficult position. So what does that look like? What's that discussion look like in your organization?
All right, let's take a global look at this. Let's take a global, and then we'll pull back down to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so great question. So we are a global company. We have a lot of customers asking that exact question, right? We have to put on our consultative hats and help them. There's a couple drivers, right? The first is compliance, right? If you're beholden to some regulatory body, that will often dictate how long your retention should be. The good news is storage is much cheaper than it's ever been. So with Sumo Logic, we almost, I would say, nearly charge zero for storage, whether it's 90 days or 365 days. It hardly moves the needle. It is expensive to bring the logs in, but the actual length of retention is less of a problem than it has been in the past, primarily because, you know, we're just storing it in the cloud, right? It's not that expensive. But I think that Devon made a great point. You have to have a system of record that's immutable, because, and a lot of customers actually come to Sumo Logic post-breach because they got, you know, caught with their pants down, right? They're like, okay, we didn't have the logs, and therefore now maybe there's punitive or fines or whatever, but they have to quickly spin up some sort of log analytics solution. So I would be asking internally, you know, ask the hard questions. What is our log aggregation policy, and how long are we storing it? And there's a good chance you probably need to beef it up a little bit just because of those compliance factors.
What do you think, Chuck?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about around it being a continuous learning exercise. So really knowing what you have, knowing what might be important in an incident, and then when things happen, because things happen, you adapt. Like, oh yeah, this actually would have been good to have, or maybe it would have been good to have for longer than we had it. And you change that. But to Devon's point, yes, you know, you can store too much, you know, from a cost perspective or a legal perspective, it can create some exposure. I know one of the issues that we had at Duke, excuse me, was just because we had so much stuff, those searches were like incredibly difficult. You know, they took a long time to run. So, you know, that's another consideration is, you know, the more data you have, the more things you have to sift through to actually find the needle in the haystack. So, you know, kind of managing the size of the haystack, I think is useful as well. But I think, again, it's just a continuous learning exercise. There's always some judgment that goes into that in terms of risk. I would actually say, for the most part, I don't think there are many compliance requirements out there that say specifically you have to keep something for this long. It's mostly based on, well, there may be some, but for the most part, it's based on risk assessment, you know, in your own organization.
And those are changing.
Yeah, publicly traded companies is 10 years.
Yeah, so we see the landscape change, and this is something we need to identify.
On some levels.
On some, but yeah, what? Yeah,
What was the, can you say it a little bit louder? What was the comment?
Publicly traded companies, there's a new SEC law that requires the log retention for 10 years for certain logs. And then in my space within government, right, we have OMB memo that just got pushed out that defines retention and the types of logs within cloud provider environments that have to be enabled. So like CloudWatch, CloudTrail, etc.
And I think you're starting to hit on something, the granularity of what the logs are, right?
Yeah.
Because you're going to have different timetables for different types of logs, and understanding that can sometimes be difficult.
Right.
Because it's a complex thing to treat these different types of data differently
And then
in
you
one
have to
system.
consider too, is that you may discover something that may be gone, so retention is a big part. Now I want to talk on this, I know. We gotta go to the next question. All right, first of all, you know, people are standing against the wall, there are seats over here. Come on, it's okay. There's plenty of seats. They're the market.
Don't be shy. Make a new
Tony
friend.
from IBM, put your hand up, say hi. You're from IBM, you come sit down too. All right, so we want to talk scale. There we go. Now we're being a family. It's all right. Get here. All right, so let's talk about, we want to talk about scale. So I'm going to put this, and then we'll start with you. We want to talk about this. So scale is important. What are some of the strategies to handle the growth that you're seeing, particularly on your team, and maybe you can kind of bring that home to Chuck? Just talk about those strategies when it comes to security. More demands are coming down. Things are changing. What does that look like
Are
for
you talking about specifically for SIM or like in general?
Well, we can talk about data securing, you know, we talk about security when it comes to data. We can talk about it in general. We can talk about SIM. We can talk about that landscape. It's a lot out there to deal with.
Yeah, so when I see this question, I think we're talking about, you know, scaling the amount of data that you need to send off to your SIM. been talking about how you can scale logging. I think it's important, as I think we touched on, understanding what data that, or what logs or data that you need. What do you need to move off? How long do you need to keep it? And how accessible is that data in the local source, right? So if there are logs and event data that you can keep locally, and you know it's there and you know it's accessible when you need it, maybe you can leave it there and you focus on the logs and event data that you need to get into your essential location. And so I think that's probably the best thing we can do to scale, right?
Sure.
So be selective about what we're moving in, take a targeted approach, and as events happen, then you can take a look at, was this data, was it actionable, was it of value, and then you can start to sort of tune based on what's noise and what you want to keep. For me, I think that's one of the best things that we could do for scale.
Yeah, and maybe Chuck or Amy have an opinion on this, but I've seen some really interesting models for security programs as well, like scaling up the people. There's two that come to mind. One is a distributed SOC. So it used to be like one dark room with a bunch of blinking lights on, with things on the wall. Some of Sumo's most mature customers have turned that kind of upside down, where security is a shared responsibility. The stakeholders have access to the security alerts and can help that triage process, right? So there's only so many security analysts to go around. It's hard. Not all of them start training at 15 and come up to ISSA, so they're not that good. Some of them aren't just not that good. So when you get the stakeholders actually being kind of like, some days they wear their security hat through that distributed SOC model, that's helpful. The other model that I think is interesting is kind of like a fusion center model, where you have kind of representation from the developers and the operations and the security team that can kind of jointly triage these alerts. Because like Amy said, the technology scaling is a problem, but the people scaling is another problem that's very hard to deal with.
Yeah, there's a few columns around it. I want to ask that question is, how much of your day do you spend looking at log data?
Well, if I'm on call, I generally spend 2 to 3 hours of my working day generally looking. Of course, if there's things that come up, I'll spend more time digging in through them. I can add a few hours. When I'm not on rotation, sometimes I'm just going in wanting to find some information for a question I have. That can be any sort of time, like 30 minutes or less. But I try and just dig in as deep as I can.
Mm-hmm. I'll say that one of the things that we do that help with that is we really take advantage of dashboards. So we spend a lot of time tuning what we look at and really trying to continuously iterate on that, because we want to eliminate noise and make it easy for when we come into the day that we're looking at dashboards and it sort of stands out what anomalous activity looks like and what those outliers are. So we do spend a lot of time focusing on that, on tuning what we're looking at.
And I'll add one thing from back to the scaling point. So honestly, being a cloud native company by its nature makes scaling easy. Again, I'll compare it to my time at Duke, where we were very on-prem, and when we had to scale our Splunk environment, it was a nightmare, just a complete nightmare.
Out of your mouth.
And I understand y'all have moved to the cloud now for
We
Splunk,
have,
so
and
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the challenges you're outlining are still there, but
Yeah.
we're on the same journey that you are. I think that one of the things that you should, like, everybody should think about is how much easier it is to design from the ground intentionally,
Sure.
rather than it is to like refurbish the old chassis.
But again, I'll go back to from a cloud native perspective and looking at how we run our environment. So we're a Google Cloud Platform customer. Our Google friend is somewhere out here in the audience, and we send them tens of millions of dollars a year for the infrastructure that we run. They're I think our single biggest expense, or at least maybe second after people. We take advantage of the fact that we're running on top of their managed services. So they have an incredible security team that's managing all the security, that infrastructure that we sit on. So it really helps us scale, because I don't have to look at all that stuff that GCP is taking care of for us under the covers.
Chuck mentioned earlier, we're in a world now where everything should be done as code, right? Brown University is one of our customers, and they've really gravitated to automating everything. And what I usually say is, if you're not actively looking for a way to automate away your job, you're not doing it right. Now, you're not going to automate away your job, but the job that you're currently doing. So everything should be done as code, whether it's infrastructure as code, detection as code, using automation, SOAR technology, right? Because that ultimately is going to get you scaling at a, let the machines do what machines can do well, and then redeploy your most valuable capital, which is the people in this room, to real, the new problems, right?
Yeah, to your core competencies, solving your business problems. Yeah.
Right? And exactly what we're talking about here is growing the evolution of people. You have to evolve. If you're sitting in the same job and you're doing the same thing for probably more than 3 or 4 years.
By the way, you want to know why I left Duke?
I don't understand. It was because of Shelley.
No, Shelley almost convinced me to stay, but no, it was.
You were super excited to go work for like a startup?
Well, it was because I was like, I've been doing this for a long time. I need to put myself in a place where I'm going to have to do things differently. And yeah, it was a big risk. I mean, Pendo was a much smaller company at that point in time. We were about 250 people and about $25 million in revenue. We're 10 times that now. So in 5 years. So it's been an incredible journey to be part of that. And I jumping in on the deep end of the pool. I had to go learn all new technology, all new people. It was fun though. Build a brand new team, and I miss my old team. They're awesome people, but
See, your transformation's been amazing too, because you're healthier, you're happier, you're better looking.
HR violation here.
Whatever. Dave, nice and loud.
I'm thinking this brings a good challenge to companies like Sumo, because you mentioned 10,000 analysts logged onto your cloud doing the searches simultaneously, and that's a heavy load because they are potentially going through, tens and hundreds of terabytes of data, searching all at the same time. So a lot of times it's not just a matter of horizontal scaling of the storage that these people need to worry about. It's what kind of rules that they will use to go through the data. And you talked about automating. So can the solution support chaining of criteria, conditions, etc.? And sometimes the old legacy SIMs struggled with that because they were not designed for in-depth correlations and contextualization based on the variety of conditions. So I'm thinking over the years you've seen different type of challenges that you went through as well. How are you managing all that demand and meeting the advanced requirements that some companies will bring to you?
Yeah, that is a good question. And the good news, it is ugly, right? But you don't have to worry about it. We have an entire team that's all they do is they monitor the Sumo Logic backend. So just as any modern cloud solution, like you're logging into your Gmail account, you don't need to worry about, does Google have enough resources for me to, search through 2 years worth of emails for this one email that all of those problems are going away. And I think every vendor, it's not just unique to Sumo Logic. You don't have to think as much about architecture anymore, right? Because we can throw cloud compute at it as much as we need to, right? If we all of a sudden have twice as many users log in and do twice as many searches, that just means our AWS bill is twice as much that day, right? So we solved it that way, and we're scaling horizontally and vertically, and we have to, right? Because when there's a breach, you can't really afford to okay, Sumo's gonna slow down, or CrowdStrike's not gonna scale, or Sentinel, or whatever the case is, right? It has to scale with you so that the technology can support what you guys are doing. So that's really the cool thing about cloud, right? It's on-demand compute.
Yeah, we're gonna shift a little bit. I'm gonna start with Devon, because we have this, we do sit next to each other at work, by the way. We talk often, and one of the things we talk about, how many of you have used ChatGPT? Written something with it? Had it read a program for you? What can this do? It's pretty neat. So I wanted to start, because there's a lot of conversations on how AI is going to impact this. But before we get really cranking on this, because I wanted to talk about some of the legal implications that we have with artificial intelligence. What are you seeing in the landscape, Devon?
Right now, legal implications of ChatGPT are really focused around intellectual property.
Okay.
Right, that's really the focus. What happens when somebody searches for something and they pull information from somebody else's document that they did years ago, copyright, patent information, things like that. The biggest thing that I see as a potential concern with AI is trade secrets, because trade secrets don't get the same protection. You don't have to publicize them, but if I have enough data and enough pieces of information, maybe I can use AI to completely independently develop what is currently a trade secret, but now I have it. So there's a lot of concerns and considerations that, and it's not a lot of case law there yet, right? Because it's so new, still evolving.
So we'll, Peter, and then we'll come to you. I want to start on the Pendo side, and we're going to take the global approach. How are you using ChatGPT?
Oh, great question. I mean, ChatGPT, other AI tools as well. I mean, so as a Google shop, we use some of Google's AI, but honestly, ChatGPT works, or OpenAI. Let's try to disambiguate those terms a little bit, because ChatGPT is sort of the consumer interface. The things that we do through the API. It's sandboxed, so those things that we interact with are our data, not the global model, so to speak. I'm actually going to call out our summer intern right there in the middle, Brenda. So one of the projects that she started for us last summer, and that we've taken since then. Colin's done a lot of work on this as well. So how many folks in the room answer security questionnaires from their customers? How many people send out security questionnaires to your vendors? So it's a big problem. I mean, we get our sales engineering team is the kind of the pointing end of the spear for that for us, but our security team obviously gets involved in answering them as well and curating the answers. So it seems like actually a great problem to solve with generative AI. So that was a theory. Could we train an AI model on all of our questionnaire responses, on our security policies, on our audit reports, et cetera, and have it be able to answer those security questions for us? So Brenda got a start for us on that last summer, and we've continued to build on that. We now have our own ChatGPT model, trained model, that we can interact with via Slack, where we can ask it a question. We can just copy and paste it from a security questionnaire or just free form it, and it will give back a really nice answer most of the time. Sometimes it gets it a little wrong, but it's been very, very interesting to see how we could use that to improve our lives as security professionals.
Yeah, a little hallucination every now and then is not too bad.
But we're looking at it, and we are, and we actually have a way to feed back in, hey, you got that wrong. Here's the right answer. But yeah, it's definitely a time saver for us.
All right, Peter.
So 2 questions. One, who was the wiseacre who put the Skynet logo back there?
That would be Sumo Logic, and his hand up's right up there. Say hi to Zach.
Very good.
All right.
But seriously, so my question would be, again, to Sumo Logic, with the role of AI, one of the things that I've had to do when I've done incident response or even monitoring, log monitoring, is getting a sample of the network traffic and taking and putting it together into, putting the capture into a file, which I can then go and quote unquote detonate to see how it affects a computer. So do you think AI would be able to, or do you envision AI being able to do that automatically, saying, hey, I found this anomaly, I took it, put it into an executable code, detonated it in a certain area, and here's what the result came back with?
Yeah, I think it's hard to put rails on what AI is going to be able to do, but I think doing that detonation, right, using like a cuckoo type technology or sandbox where you can bring it in and use behavioral analysis. Okay, what files did it modify? What network traffic did it generate? I would expect that the whole field of detection is going to rapidly move to AI, because it does require a lot of manpower, right? We don't have time to analyze every single binary and load it up in a VM and see what it's doing. But it would be easy for AI to fingerprint that and just kind of say, hey, this is likely high fidelity with a high fidelity, score. Like, okay, we think this is malicious. I gave a small talk at RSA just last year about AI, and I think the key thing to think about is all new technology will be weaponized. So just as we as defenders are looking for unique ways to use AI, right? Maybe it'll help with the detection, like you're describing, or maybe the query writing or the analytics. They're also going to be using AI for, authentication, deep fake or scripting. They have a lot of unique power now to attack us that wasn't available before. And I guess it's nothing new, right? It's the cat and mouse game that is security. But if we don't adopt AI rapidly, I think that they'll start winning more. One of the things that Sumo is doing, and actually Azure Sentinel and CrowdStrike came out with what they call Charlotte, yeah. And it's the ability to interface with these tools through natural language, right? So typically you have to be a data scientist, right? I need to know how to write this complex query with joins and subqueries and all of this, which is not easy to do. But if you could just say, hey, show me all of the SQL injection attempts across 2 hours and graph it in a bar chart or whatever, like just be able to talk to it and then say, I think this is what you're looking for. We're there already, right? That's actually in product now. So when you talk about natural language, LLM technology, that's going to be another tool that we have in our Defender tool belt. But it needs to go beyond that, right? And I don't know honestly what that's going to look like tomorrow.
Yeah, actually, I want to add something. Sorry, this actually a really important point. So Amy and I, we talked about in our openings that we started our careers doing systems and network admin. So one of the reasons why I thought this security questionnaire project would be very valuable for my team, for folks like Colin and Brenda as our intern, I think those that are getting started in the industry today where systems and network admin were foundational skills for us, this is a foundational skill for everybody that's coming into the field today. And those of us that are around and plan to be around for a while longer, we need to understand how this technology works. So one of the reasons we did this project is we wanted to do something hands-on where we actually got to build our own AI tool to understand how that technology works, to understand how it could be broken, how it could be attacked. So I would challenge everybody to dig in and learn. This is an important topic.
We got a question, go ahead.
So related question, how are you securing your own security chatbot?
Yeah, so I mean, again, we're using OpenAI. It's it is in the cloud. It is API focused. So we have our sandboxed environment. It's protected by an API key. So like everything else in the cloud.
I meant when you send it to customers.
Oh, we don't give it to customers at present. So it's an internal tool only. So yeah, I mean
It also reveals some sensitive information.
Yeah. Right now, we look at the results, we refine the results. Now, at some point in the future, maybe we will expose it to customers directly, but right now we don't. Yeah, it's only internal.
Yeah, not so much a question, but more of a statement. Microsoft is releasing Copilot, and Copilot will be integrated directly with Word and Outlook and Excel and Teams. And I just want to point out that that's a whole different level than actually having your end users type a question into ChatGPT.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's coming across pretty much all tools are getting that type of capability. Yeah.
All right, we're going to shift gears. We're keep flying for a couple more questions, and then we'll have some time for some more questions from the audience. But we really want to talk about this, and we'll start in with Sumo and work our way over. But what are you seeing from regulatory standards, compliance strategies? What are they concerned about? What are your customers coming to you saying, hey, we got to fix the problem here. We got a compliance standard against us. We have this regulatory issue. We got to fix this. What are you seeing at that global level?
So I would say the number one problem that I'm still seeing is how do you deal with all of the digital exhaust that's being created by these new services, these new applications that you're building, and having and this is kind of like the theme of the night, it seems like scalable security data lake that can ingest all of this data. And then at that point you can determine, well, what do I use the data for? Maybe it's for legal compliance purposes, maybe it's for analytics, maybe it's for business intelligence, or site reliability or operational resilience or whatever the case may be. But if you don't have a place to store the data, then you're already behind the 8 ball, right? It's very hard. And I always think of it like a scale, right? On one side of the scale is your business innovation and your velocity getting to market with new cool technology, right? Which these guys are experts in. And then on the other side is security. And some people joke, instead of the role of CISO, it's CIS no, which is they just say no to everything, right? As you,
As Chuck said, goes down.
yeah, not putting fears, but
I have stories about
the
that.
reality. You have to balance the innovation with the risk, right? Because if you're too aggressive and you lean into the innovation, then you're opening yourself to risk, right? Because you didn't develop it in a secure way, you didn't shift left. But on the flip side, if you have too much security, you're going to lose, right?
You're going to go out of business.
Yeah, your business is going to be outpaced by the other guys who aren't being slowed down. So it's a hard problem to solve, but you can get close to that equilibrium of, innovation and security. But, if you have the answer, let us know.
Well, so from the other side, how often a day do you hear compliance, 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 compared to, let's say, 15 years ago?
So for compliance for us, it's a couple of things. We do SOC 2 Type 2. I've been doing that for years. Pretty straightforward for us, actually. Where compliance, I think, has been more challenging is on the privacy side of the world, because I think that's where, if you look at all the legislation that's popping up, and I'm not trying to downplay all the the DoD stuff and the stuff that in the government says we don't sell to government customers, so FedRAMP was like crazy, so we just decided not to do it. CMMC, crazy, we're not going to do it. But we do. Our customers have the choice of sending us PII. Many don't. Some do. So we have to assume everything that we receive is PII. And so we think about GDPR. We think about CCPA. We think about CPRA, the new CCPA, and all the other myriad of privacy regulations that are coming up at state and national levels across the world. So we have to figure out what the high bar is and set that, because we can't like follow every single one. We have to figure out, we need to meet this bar. If we meet this bar, we're going to meet all of them. But it's challenging because, again, those laws are getting tougher. Yep. But back to the point about innovation, people want to build products that people love, and to do that, you oftentimes need some of that personal information to customize it. So it's definitely an interesting balance to strike there. It's a daily struggle.
So, Ron, how often do you hear compliance with privacy in your day?
A lot.
To the audience, how many of you have a compliance standard you're dealing with?
Yeah,
The rest of you, where do you work that you don't do this?
I have 15, not just one.
Well,
Yeah.
Aaron's special. What we want to do is we have a lot of this, and this is part of our education. When I was sitting down with Tony, with IBM, we have this conversation regularly. And if we don't get smart about this, we're going to get past. I will tell you, I think features are great. I think our customers are important, but I don't know of any other feature that a customer wants more than security right now. So I've said that because I have to fight with developers. Say, why can't I do this? Because it's insecure. Well, the customer really like it more than they want their data being lost. Come on. You really have to. There's a balance there, but where is the mark? And that's changing. And I'm going to punt this to Devon because I wanted to talk just a minute about that when we get to our next question. Is where do you see that going in the legal community? Chuck made a great point. Things are changing, getting more constrained. Where do you see it going?
I mean, honestly, Chuck kind of answered the question already. When you think about it, when GDPR got released, the biggest concern that everybody had was, does this become the de facto standard? Because everybody's trying to do business globally, right? Everybody wants to do business in Europe and all over the place. And so if you want to do that, then obviously you need to adhere to GDPR. So that's what we saw. We saw that happen with CCPA, and now the amendment CPRA or some bunch of letters. That's all they're doing. And then when you start examining the different state laws that are coming out, they're all kind of, they're not mirroring, but they're in the same vein of what GDPR has done. And so that thing means that maybe the minimum baseline needs to be GDPR for us. If we can pass GDPR, then we're probably good everywhere else. The last concern would be the actual notification laws.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think if we could get to a global standard, it would be awesome, including the notification piece of it, which is a mess.
So to your piece though, right, and that's because you're a lawyer now, right? It really isn't about your contract language, right? So there's somebody in here that knows that I live by malicious compliance, right? So I take the language of the contract and use malicious compliance to get them to do the things that we want them to do, and then hold them accountable to those requirements, right? So, you know, and everybody shrieks when they see those requirements, but when they're written in a contract, now I got something to use, right?
Well, I mean, we saw that. Oh, okay.
Go ahead and comment, then we'll shoot it.
So, I mean, we saw that happen with when the Privacy Shield got broken down, right? And for those of you who don't know, the Privacy Shield was what allowed for us to pass data back and forth between the U.S. and Europe. When that went down, all they did was go to a contract language. That's essentially what they did. So if you have a contract that states your requirements and you have to be, adhere to it, it'll do close to the same thing.
No, that's good. All right.
I was just going to make more of a statement, but I think it adds to what you're doing. I'm the senior compliance analyst for an industrial global engineering manufacturing company. And it's not just, I'm doing the CMMC dance right now, but it's not just the state and the federal regulations. We've got every single customer with a different framework, and there doesn't seem to, right now nobody's having that conversation of, well, if we meet this, then we're good, because everybody wants their stuff met. So we've had to draw a line and say, these are the things we're meeting. If that's good enough for you, great, let's talk. If it's not, sorry, but we can't, this is our team. We have this many people, and there are those global, TISACs and CMMC and GDPR and Cyber Essentials, and we need to satisfy those things.
So, yeah, Devon, by the way, can you get all your lawyer friends to agree on a standard set
On the hill?
of...
You go to the hill? You agree on it?
Yeah, I mean, so much of my time goes towards looking at, we have, around 3,000 customers, and probably at least a third of those want to have like custom contract language, with their specific security language. So it's always this, well, yeah, we do that, but it's, done, written in a slightly different way than how we actually do it. But, it spends a lot of economic loss on everybody's part doing that.
Maybe OpenAI version 6 will do that.
Yeah, there we go. We'll just send our contracts to that. Actually, I think.
I don't think there's a magic bullet. I could make a statement, but I'm going to try to phrase it as a question out of respect for the panel. How do you feel about the fact that some of the regs are just unachievable, and all of us, there's some that are literally not achievable, and some of us in organizations that are bigger don't have the flexibility to necessarily turn away customers. I'm sorry, I don't know what your name is right in front of me, but very practical, smart statement that you made. How do you feel about the fact that sometimes you just do the best you can and move on with your lives?
All right, we're going to do 2 answers to that.
Devon, I don't want your lawyer opinion. I know what the lawyer response is.
I want to call my lawyer for that,
You're
answering that.
So how do you feel about that?
Honestly, the question is,
You cannot do a 1-hour report criteria. It is unachievable.
I know. It's ridiculous, and I think honestly, what's going to happen is the market is going to kind of decide. Eventually, people are going to keep getting fined. The business community is going to come full board. They're going to lobby, and then they're going to adjust it. That's basically what's going to happen. Now, how long it takes just depends on how much it costs. Yeah, really.
Well, that's going to be the driver. So I know we're coming to the end. Real quick one.
Just real quick.
Real quick.
So Google Cloud has a product called Assured Workloads, and it has all the compliance that you're basically asking for built in under project level deployment. So we enable our customers to basically select the project, apply that compliance to it, and you're now within that project, within that org, compliant with GDPR, or with FedRAMP, or with IL5, IL4, IL2 rollouts for DoD. All of those are baked in, you can use today that are available.
Is that ors or ands?
Or, but it gets within the same org.
Okay.
So you can basically have 500 projects. You've got an overseas project supporting EU citizens. GDPR on that project. You're now compliant. Data residency and everything is broken down into that, so you're not sharing anything external. And any APIs that interact with it that are unauthorized, it blocks. For our DoD customers, why I have no hair for someone up front, we have U.S. citizenship requirements, right? So we have to make sure on the back end we have our U.S. citizen customer support associated for those DoD type contracts. So all that's baked in again for the IL245 expectation. And then for vendors, they can technically go to Google Cloud, procure those services, deploy their products on top of that, and then take our CRM, inherit all those controls, and deploy FedRAMP high services right out of the box.
I don't want to disagree with my good Google friend because, again, we love Google, but yeah, I'm going to disagree. There's more to it than that.
But you're going to win,
yeah.
because after we finish this, you're going to stand in the corner until we get some training out of you. Or come to the meeting here.
Or become a member. Our AI SecPalm. So
Yeah,
it
notice
does
that you have
security AI.
handwritten thing. You need to become. We need to talk. All right, so we're going to have a couple, because I know it's getting late. I don't want everybody to take off. We've got some good discussions. We may spin this into something else, which that's why I like panels. Panels are great. We want to talk a little bit about, and it doesn't have to be Sumo specific, but it could be. We want to talk about something sexy. So I want to have 3 really quick, 1 minute, something cool, proactive threat hunting. Tell us a story. Give us a 1 minute coolness. Anybody got one? I got one. All right, hold on. You're 2. Colin?
Yeah, I can spin you a story. This is something that I think we encountered this past summer, and it all was we could treat within Sumo, so it was really great. We originally had started getting some alerts that some accounts were acting out of normal, and we started to investigate them. There was an account that was logging in both Europe and the United States, and we were like, all right, that's great. We'd love to see it. Tracked it back into Sumo, found that some engineers were sharing credentials when they weren't supposed to, which is a big no-no. Had to talk to them, and we were able to link from the one event to the multiple people, and then we were able to communicate to them, and then we were able to link in IT and be like, hey, we need to reset this account so this doesn't happen again, and then we set in new controls so it didn't happen again. So
that's good.
And I think we did all that within like 45 minutes, so it was great. From beginning to end, it was awesome.
Since 15 years old, ladies and gentlemen.
So one of the reasons I've been texting him angry texts is saying, when are you guys going to get your FedRAMP certification? You're at IL2, we need you at IL4, 5, and 6. But we've created a large language model that's hosted that we can take synthetic data, because we can't use real data, but for access badge logs, network logs, financial records, a whole bunch of different disparate logs that you would get from across the enterprise. We put it in this large language model, and then we start asking it questions. So what is the likelihood that Chuck Kessler is an insider threat? And it says, well, based on the time of day that he's badging in, his financial records, and this, it's a 98% confidence that that Chuck Kessler is an insider threat.
Oh yeah,
right?
definitely.
So, and you can ask follow-up questions to it too, based on the logs it ingested. And we did that within like an hour. And I've never touched, I'm not a coder, I'm not a large language guy. We just started playing with a local language model that you could download and did that.
That's pretty cool. I want to grab one from Sumo. You got a sexy Sumo story?
Yeah, I mean, actually, just listening to the example that was shared, it's not too dissimilar. Sumo, interestingly enough, is kind of the back end for many MSSPs, and I don't know what the count is, probably over a dozen use this on the back end. And last year we released a new entity behavioral type detection, which basically takes every entity in the enterprise, which could be 10,000 users or 10,000 systems, and it does that baselining, right? And the MSSP called us up and said, hey, what we're seeing something that happened last week, and we wanted to tell you the story. They had an executive flying overseas. They were in the airport. They couldn't get their MFA working. Of course, they turned it off. They logged into the Wi-Fi in the airport. And you know how this goes. I think they connected to a Wi-Fi pineapple or something. Anyway, they thought it was fine. They turned it back on when they got home. Well, our entity behavior analytics just started popping, saying, hey, this account is now logging in from different locations that have not been seen before. They're accessing different services. They're running commands or binaries that they haven't done in the past. And it started popping all of these alerts, and the MSSP wasn't even aware of these rules, but they were quickly able to say, okay, obviously this is something malicious, and that comes from more intelligent detection, right? When you have a baseline that's not based across all users, but each user individually has their own kind of what's normal, then the fidelity of the rules really start to improve.
That's good. And we're finishing up. We've got a couple slides we're going to run through, and then we have a call to action, something that was really important, and I'm glad you stayed around because we've got some really cool training that we're going to start hosting. We're excited to talk about. So I'm going to throw this up. You want to cover these two?
Yeah, I mean, I think we actually talked a lot about this. I think Mark Andreessen, he's like a well-known, I guess, entrepreneur, investor in the technology space, and he coined the phrase, software is eating the world or ate the world. I think following that up, cloud software ate that world, and now AI software is eating that world. So hold on, it's going to be a crazy ride. I think we need to be thinking about ways to incorporate, responsibly, right? All of this AI technology into everything that we do, for sure. I think that's one of the bleeding edge technologies.
Yeah, and nothing says anything better than a nice, pretty picture. So you can walk us through this a little bit if you'd like.
Yeah, I think the idea here, and I mentioned it before, the kind of Sumo Logic being the center of a fusion center where you can democratize. You remember with Sumo Logic, it's unlimited users, unlimited searches, which is great because you can have the developer and the system owner and the security analyst logging in as much as they want, running as much searches as they want. Selfishly, we put Sumo Logic in the center of your people, processes, and technology, because it is that security data lake that lives in the cloud. And that, I think, that force multiplier that you hear, when you have data that everybody can use. We toured the floor of Samsung Smart Things, and we were shocked. We were like, wait, how many different use cases do you have for Sumo Logic? And they were walking us through how everybody on their, the different teams use it in a slightly different way. And it kind of surprised us because we hadn't anticipated the tool, and they were almost abusing it, right? Like they're running some crazy analytics over here that we didn't really anticipate, but at the same time they paid to bring the data in, use it and abuse it as much as you want.
That's good. So call to action, but before we get started on this, we're going to finish this up. I want to bring all Sumo Logic reps up here to say hi. And the last thing I want to say is, this is Colin's first panel. Have a round of applause. Grateful to all of our panelists. Thanks for taking time away from family, coming in, hanging out with us. How do you like panels versus presentations? All right, we'll bring them all in. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and do the call to action, and then we'll finish up and we'll adjourn for the evening. So.
Awesome. I just want to start by saying thank you to everyone for the conversation, the back and forth, to our wonderful coach Rob for moderating so well, and then obviously to our panelists, Colin, Chuck, Amy, Devon, and Chaz there. Really quick before we break. This is super important to us as far as training, but we are going to be hosting in-person Sumo Cert Jams. That's really going to be in more partnership with ISSA. So really trying to get more community around what are we trying to do as it relates to Sumo. How can we get more free training is the key word there. But really starting with the basics, right? What's the core platform? How can we start getting data flowing in and getting a better understanding of what are we actually looking at from an environment perspective? Then going into more advanced level, right? Cloud SIM administration, cloud SOAR, some of those different technologies, but really getting hands-on.
And it will translate well, like whether you're a Splunk user or Elastic or Azure Sentinel. Once you have a good foundation of how you write your search syntax, how to do those threat hunts. So don't think of it as, okay, well, it's not going to translate to my day job. It will, actually.
Yeah, great call there, Chaz. I think, too, like I said earlier, it is free for everyone. So you don't have to be a Sumo customer. In this scenario, If you're wanting to learn a new skill set, or if you have a job interview where the requirement is, hey, we'd like to have some Sumo Logic experience, this is a prime platform for you guys to understand, and we have it self-paced as well online. But this, doing it in partnership with ISSA and doing more in-person trainings, hopefully in the beautiful Pendo Tower there.
Come on, anytime.
That is really what we're trying to do. On top of that, we're going to be looking at an RTP community, so really a user group, whether it be via Slack or Discord. And we want, at the start, right, it's going to be answered and driven through Sumo Logic, myself, our engineers, whoever that is, to help answer some of those questions as it relates to content, dashboards, queries. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we want to hand over the keys to the users, right? We want you guys to educate and share best practices, those use cases, and really what does that look like holistically in terms of content, dashboards, everything I just said. Also be on the lookout for some more threat hunting labs, right? So how can we get together and understand more real life scenarios of how to best utilize Sumo Logic. But also that QR code goes to a Google form. It is not marketing emails, no knock on marketing, but it is purely for training, right? Please, if you want to scan that, sign up. This is going to help drive our demand internally. We're hoping to do it on a quarterly basis. Obviously, if we get more users and more people, that frequency can change. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here.
All right.
You can, if you want to get like our core platform, it's not all the bells and whistles are enabled, but a lot of them. Anyone can go to sumologic.com and just sign up for a free account. And I monitor my kids' internet usage with Sumo Logic with my own account. You can use it for whatever you want, right? So just sign up for a free account and you can start playing with it.
All right, Chuck, you got a comment?
Yeah, again, just, excuse me, had a comment and then lose my voice, so what about that? Sorry, but I, again, just want to thank everybody for inviting us out here, for Sumo for sponsoring, and everybody coming out and being part of this amazing community. It's been a while since I've been to one of these meetings. It's always amazing when I come. Definitely need to do it more often. Also, I'm going to put a plug in. I hired this amazing kid right here. I mentioned my summer intern out there, Brenda. She is amazing too, and if I had a position right now, I'd be hiring her. If anybody's hiring right now, you should go hire her before I get a chance to hire her. So just, there you go. But yeah, this is such a great place. Thank you for coming. And thanks, Rob.
So as we're finishing up, education to come, here's my challenge to you, and we're finishing up. Get somebody who needs some help, go get them and bring them here. We're not a respecter of persons. We'll always have free food, we'll always have something to drink, and we're going to make sure everybody gets trained. This is where our ISSA family centers. Make sure there's no barriers here. Everybody's welcome. There are no barriers here. If you don't have a computer, we're working on it right now, re-imaging a bunch for hours, we'll have those available for you. We'll have training for you, and we care about you. But you're responsible as being on the front lines. If you're not knocking on that person next to you and saying, hey, what kind of training have you gotten? Hey, by the way, we're going to be doing some Sumo Logic training. We're going to be doing this, and we're going to build this stuff in. I could look at Peter Hewitt, was one of the luminaries that we had. Has been around for a long time, and he'll be quiet. And has always been there. David and I were there when he was education director many times when he forgot breakfast that morning and blamed me.
Rob never lets you forget anything, by the way.
But I will promise you, when you come to our training, we want to make sure that you're ready to go. If you need our help, come find us, and we'll help you. And I hope you have a wonderful evening, and thank you for making it a great evening. Drive careful, we'll talk soon.